Why don't we go ahead and get started if we could? Thank you all. For those of you who are on the walking tour, we appreciate you coming out, and we appreciate you coming back in too. So this is a continuation of the July 21st meeting of the Planning Commission and the City Council. We are going to hear from the developer with the presentation, then we're going to hear from staff, and then we'll take comments and questions from the Planning Commission and City Council. There are no comments in a work session by the public. You're certainly welcome to speak your mind at later hearings or to correspond with us privately through emails or phone calls, et cetera. But today, the hearing will be with the Planning Commission and the City Council. After that, we'll have another matter, and then we're going to have a closed session at the end of the evening, which the public will be unable to attend. Mr. Batt, would you like to go ahead and get started?
Thank you very much. And thanks to everybody who came out on the site and walked around with us to get a better idea of what this project might look like. I'm just going to go quickly because we are limited on time and just kind of really show you with these slides what we were talking about. This slide here just shows you a view of the project. So the hotel is here that we talked about. The apartment building starts here and goes down in a circle.
Would you
and
like a laser pointer?
Sure.
Put up the projector in your eyes.
Right here. Okay, that's better. That's better. So the hotel is here, and the hotel comes up next to the apartments, and then the apartments start here, and they come down and around, and then we step down a floor. We're 5/1 here, and then we step down to 4/1 as we are coming up on Grove Avenue. And then the apartment building goes around. We've got outdoor seating, patios, and sidewalks that are about 16 feet to 20 feet in width, depending on how it configures out. This is the project road we were talking about that goes through the project, comes out here on West Street, Park Avenue, and the north side of West Street. This is the condominium building, this L here, and it is 5 floors, and it's set back about 30 feet to the building. And we have brick patio sidewalks that we're going to be building throughout and around the project and go all the way down Park Avenue. We'll be putting in trees, and there'll be light posts that are kind of hard to see on this drawing. There's one there, here, and then there'll be a continuation of that down here. Next slide. I do? Okay. This is just, we showed you this before, the project team, Venable, Dave Lasso, Walter Phillips, Karen, and Antoinette were with us earlier. Wells and Associates, who are doing the traffic studies. GTM Architects are doing the overall architecture, and Street Sense are the retail planners. And I'll say that team is very experienced at doing modern, urban, retail mixed-use projects, and have a great reputation for designing this type of commercial and integrating these uses and creating a what we call in the business a social gathering and real sense of place. We're trying to create a destination. We have 4 acres of property here, and we believe we have just enough property to create a substantial commercial retail destination. And this here is just showing you the retail by itself that is underneath the apartments and the hotel. And again, we have 50,000 square feet of retail. This is the first building along West Broad Street. This is the project road coming through. Another building of retail on West Broad Street coming down to the intersection of West and West Broad Street, then coming down here to West Street. And this is the entire West Street retail building. So there's significantly more retail space in this project than what you might be used to when you look at the other mixed-use projects here in Falls Church. We refer to it as really not only a retail destination, but a retail shopping center with retail-style surface parking, which makes all the difference in the world in attracting better tenants, and keeping retail space leased. This is a view of the project from the W&OD trail here. And so this is West Street and the West Street retail and dining, outdoor patio seating, apartment building, the project road coming through, and the condominiums that we are designing as row house condominiums. And they go down Park Avenue and back. This is another view from Park Avenue of the row house condominiums, which are here. And then behind further is the project. This is the hotel. And back over this way are the apartments coming around and coming around this way. And again, the internal project road. This is an open space that separates the condo building from the project road as it comes into West Street. This is another view of the condominium project as you're coming down Park Avenue. Again, it's set back. This building is set back 30 feet. I believe the terraces are about 25 to 26 feet back from the curve from Park Avenue. And then they go down the side and eventually come in contact with the hotel, which is here. We're going to be planting trees. The brick paved sidewalk will come down Park Avenue. We'll be putting in the decorative street lights, continuing all the way down Park Avenue as well. And then we'll be doing a lot of tree planting between the condominiums and the church property that goes along this side on the east of us. This is just a view of the West Street patio dining. I think that the architect is showing, about 18 to 25 foot setback here of the building. This is the interior of the project. You're looking at the promenade that we're talking about. We're doing some work right now on the social gathering features that are going to be in the middle of this project for people to congregate, to have benches to sit at, and possibly have some green space where we can even have some entertainment, some live music and so forth. And this promenade is lined with retail on both sides. Some of this retail will have their, in the case of restaurants, will have their patio dining on the outside. There will be a few retailers that will have storefronts inside. But inside this project, it's important to know that we're going to create a front of the house look inside the project as well. So we're using front of the house materials. We're creating, in some cases, front storefronts, and it's going to have a real front of the house look and its own streetscape inside. And what you're seeing here is the blue sky. We have two major openings in the project, and all this white area represents sunlight coming through. The white area here also represents sunlight coming through. And we're looking at right now some ideas that we have for some of the retailing inside. We are looking at kind of creating a market for some of this retail where it would be kind of a gourmet food market. We're looking at kind of setting up in a row with storefronts that would line up or face inside the project. Gourmet butcher shop, cheese shop, for example, a fresh seafood market, and we're not sure exactly where they're going to go. Wine shop, bakery, and put them together and create kind of a concentrated union market that they have downtown for Falls Church, so to speak. This is just another view from the other end looking westbound of this interior retail, and this just shows you a very large open space that's creating this sunlight that's coming down that these two gentlemen are standing on. And there'll be retail lined up all the way down this street, which we're calling the promenade. This is a site plan. This is a detailed picture, so I'll save that for questions and answers. But just to show you what's here, This is the road system, Park West, Northwest, the intersection of West and Broad Street, retail buildings, condo building, ramp to go down to the underground parking, ramp off of West Broad Street to go down to the underground parking. This is an image of the first level of underground parking, just to give you some feel for the size and scope of that parking. Sure.
While you're on that page, is that the only ramp down and up?
There are 2 ramps. We were talking about that today. There are 2 ramps. This is one ramp that comes off of West Broad Street, which is here. So this is a full access off of West Broad Street, and this carries you underneath the project. So the project is above this ramp here, ramp down from Broad Street. It goes about 3 feet down into this garage area. And then there is a ramp here that's coming from the surface parking down into this level of parking. And this parking level will have parking for the hotel will be dedicated down here in this area. There will be about 80, I think it's about 80 parking spaces for retail also to service the retail above. And then the rest of the parking spaces underground, we also have another level down. This is P1, this is P2. There will be a single ramp into P2, and this will be dedicated all to residential. Were you following that? Okay. This is just an image of a drawing of what we were talking about, the intersection of Grove and West Street, and this is the pork chop I was referring to, extending it back to the trail, creating an island for people to cross and stop if there's traffic, narrowing the lanes, the turn lanes, right out, right in only. And this is the Park and Northwest Street intersection we were talking about at the site, about moving the curbs. This is the existing curb. This is the existing curb. Moving that curb out, and bringing sloping Park Avenue down into our property to line it up with West Street, and to turn West Street, as you can see here, towards Park to create as much of a 90-degree angled intersection as we can. And we've actually moved our project road over to the east slightly so that it can line up better with West Street. 4-way stop here to control the traffic coming through the intersection. We've got some striping to direct traffic through the intersection. And with this alignment, we think that we're going to improve significantly the line of sight for people trying to use this intersection. And that's all.
Lights. Thank you very much. Mr. Shields, we're going to hear from staff.
We will. Gary Fuller is the principal planner on this project. He'd like to present the council just with a quick summary of the changes to the project since the council last saw this. This is attachment 10, has a summary of that and some of the issues that staff has identified that we would continue to work with the developer on. Rick Goff is here to present just a quick overview of the fiscal impact analysis, and that's an attachment 16 of the council's packet. I would just note at the outset that as we're discussing this at work session, the decision point is, in terms of process, where this is in the process, the council's decision would be whether or not to refer this out to boards and commissions for comment, go through that process, or whether there's still work to do really at the staff level, working with the EDC before it's ready for that. What the recommendation has been is that if it is referred out for boards and commission review, the schedule would be board and commission comments in September. We would then consolidate and work with those comments with staff recommendations in the month of October and bring it back to the council in November. We have had a lot of discussions between staff and the developer about the density of the proposed development for this site. Initially, in our discussions, we have looked for movement on the density to reduce it. And when we look at the summary, we'll see that the site is carrying more density with this application. And the developer can speak to the reasons for why that is. And the developer can also speak in terms of flexibility on that. I think people should have some sense of the developer's perspective on that in terms of referring this out to boards and commissions. So with that quick overview and introduction, let me let me pause to see if there's any questions for me, but Gary Fuller can provide his summary, then Rick Goff, and then take questions from there. Mr. Fuller.
Thank you. The original project submission was in March, and then we had a new submission in the last 10 days, and so that's the one that you received. And in summary, the changes, the hotel is unchanged. They're still projecting a 150-room hotel. On the retail, they've increased that from 39,000 to almost 47,000. It's about a 19% increase. And overall, so the commercials increased about 5%. On the residential, originally they had 302 units. They've broken those into 253 apartments now with the addition of residential condominiums along Park Avenue and the adjacent R District area. And there's 67 condos approved, in terms of the proposed. And there's overall is a 15% increase on that side from the 302 units to 320. The overall commercial ratio originally for commercial and residential was 28% and 71%. Now it's 26.5% and 73.5%. The FAR, which is the floor area ratio based on the almost 4-acre site, is 2.67. The current submission is now at 2.91. And so the changes were basically the change in the residential component to have a for-sale condominium product. The hotel stayed the same. The retail's up. There was an anchor drugstore that's been removed, and that's just general retail at this point. So in terms of the major decisions with this application and process, there's a comprehensive plan amendment. Right now, it's designated business and low-density residential on Park. That would be proposed changes to mixed use for the entire area. Second, there's a rezoning, be a map amendment from B3 and the base B1, R1A, R1B zoning on Park Avenue to overall B1 for the entire site. So it's primarily commercial now, and the residential on Park under this plan gets rezoned to B1. Special exception, there's two of them, one for residential uses in a commercial zone, and the second is for a height bonus. Some parts of the building, primarily on Broad Street, would be at the an 85-foot maximum height. The applicant has looked at a number of issues in the review of this plan, and those include the parking, also traffic studies. They're currently updating both these studies to reflect this new plan, which they've just formulated and turned in for review. We've just begun our review of it in terms of staff. The building height remains basically the same. There's some building step backs that transition the building along Northwest Street, and there's some step backs on the condos adjacent to the R District. The residential impacts and any transition of them is something that's being evaluated further by the applicant and proposals in terms of their program for this project. Vehicle traffic, the traffic impact analysis study is being updated to reflect this new design. Then there's also a parking study that talks about the number of parking spaces and why that should work for the site. They've also been looking at, of late, some traffic improvements, which was described briefly tonight, at the Northwest and Park intersection. Some of the concepts are to straighten that up into perpendicular, sort of a T-shaped entrance coming out of their project, sort of address those items. The streetscape is being proposed for the entire project. It's full streetscape on Broad Street plus additional 6 feet. It's variable, but I think their target is 16 feet along West Street, and that's, off of Broad Street, which is where our current plan is, and then a narrower brick sidewalk in front of the condominiums. There's several waivers that are proposed. One is regarding the landscape buffers, the material that go in that along the side of the condominiums. And then in terms of the commercial entrance, being within 100 feet of an R district. Voluntary concessions, there's extensive streetscape improvements, as I've mentioned. There's pedestrian crosswalk improvements. There's money for funding improvements for WOND Trail in the park. There's also school capital cost contribution. There's a transportation demand management plan. There's lead proposed for the residential components buildings. They're also consolidating 11 lots. It's a large property, almost 4 acres, as a preferred use hotel as part of their proposal. And there's significant retail, commercial at 46,000 square feet. And as I said, the ratio is 26% commercial for this project, along with the 320 multifamily units that are proposed. So this application is their resubmission. They're updating some of their final studies to provide its staff, and so at this point, it's a continuing process. So, thank you.
Fiscal impact analysis by Rick Goff. This is attachment 16 in your packet.
Our estimates for annual city revenue and expenses for the project are in a relatively narrow range on the gross revenue side, but they're heavily dependent on a key variable, school impact, in terms of city expenses and therefore the net revenue result. So the net revenue result reflects a bit wider range. The development proposal with its new mix of component parts would yield about $3.4 to $3.5 million a year in gross revenue for the city as measured by our fiscal impact model. And that's at a point when the buildings, of course, are fully occupied. In terms of city expenses, those would range from about $1.7 to $2 million per year, depending on the ratio of school-aged pupils per residential units that we have assumed in our modeling. Using 2013-2014 school year data from all apartments in the city and applying that ratio of 0.33 to the 253 West and Broad apartments, as well as a ratio of 0.10 pupils per condo unit for the 67 condos, we would expect about 91 pupils in the project and a net fiscal impact of about $1,473,000 per year. As another data point, we used Pearson Square and the Reed Building apartments and compared ratios by unit bedroom count, while also using the 0.10 pupil ratio for each condo. Using that end of the range, we would expect about 71 school-age pupils in the buildings, again based on the past year school data. This would result in a net fiscal impact of about $1,716,000 per year. Now, the assumptions for the pupil ratios are extremely important in our modeling because they represent about 70% of the overall expenses that the model captures. In terms of a net result for the annual fiscal impact, the current tax yield from existing uses on the entire 4 acres of land is about $356,000 a year. Subtracting this figure from the fiscal impact results I just reported gives us a net revenue range of about $1.1 to $1.4 million a year.
Okay, thank you. Is that it from staff? Okay, great. Why don't we go ahead and hear comments and questions cumulatively? And I was planning on starting with the Planning Commission, unless you have a comment or question.
Yeah, why don't we give a report out of the EDC as well?
Absolutely, that's right. Good point.
All right, so the EDC has met on this project February 18th, May 5th, and July 14th. Some of the meetings were conducted with the developer, some were just with the members. But really the takeaways of the general consensus, and it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was unanimous, but the main consensus areas were on the positive side, the lot consolidation, which we talked about, which is the 14 lots being consolidated. Other discussion points involved, the hotel is a net positive as far as the fiscal impact and also the spin-off on commercial development. There was a lot of discussion about the need for greater guarantees on the commercial program, which I'll talk to individually as well. And then 4 was the residential density is too high and needed to be lowered. So those were the 4 general consensus comments, and I think individual members are going to provide input into that as well. So that's a quick summary of the EDC meetings that we've had.
Thank you, Mr. Baruch. Why don't we go on to the Planning Commission? Ms. Rogers, do you want to maybe start or have your group go ahead and make their comments one by one to us?
Okay, I'll be glad to start. Ms. Rogers,
Thank you. This is a question for the developer. Can you explain the structure of row house condominiums? What exactly does that entail? Are they really row houses or are they just apartments?
Well, they're not apartments. They
I mean,
are
condos.
condominiums,
Yeah,
and they are designed to have a row house look. Is what it is.
but that's all external. Internally, it would all just be.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
I noticed in your voluntary concessions, you talk about realigning the streets and making the traffic patterns better. I also noticed you're giving money to the parks. The park letter to us said that they would prefer construction rather than money, and they're also talking about traffic lights rather than stop signs. I would have to agree with them on these issues. Also, Gary said the applicant is looking at the parking and the traffic studies. In what way are you looking at them? I mean, I know you can't give us a final solution at this time, but what exactly are you looking at to try to make these things better?
Well, on the question about the parking, working on a parking management program. We've got some work to finish on that. We watch very carefully, obviously, the ordinances that are in place for parking, but also on the commercial side. We have very specific needs and demands from the retailers and from the hotel on the amount of parking that they want to have, they need to have, based on their experience. And so we've reached a level of parking provided that meets the standards of the retail and meets the standards of the hotel. We're still working on the issue of variances, parking variances, as it relates mainly to the residential. The other part of that is that there will be, and there has to be some more discussions with the hotel. There's an opportunity to share parking between the hotel and retail for those retailers that are more daytime oriented and early evening oriented. The hotels, the majority of the people using the hotel parking are coming in after 9 o'clock. So, and it intensifies as you get close to 11 o'clock. So we've got a little bit more work to do to see what we think is the right parking sharing that's going to take place between the retail and the hotel.
And that will be developed as you get the studies back.
Correct, and also further dialogue with the hotel people who have a lot of experience. One of the things that you see in these urban projects, and there are articles about this too, that we in the development community are learning, continuing to learn about parking from two standpoints. How to optimize the sharing of parking between uses. And the other thing is that the marketplace, as we get inside the Beltway, people are using cars less. And we're seeing the impact of that as people build these projects and build a lot of parking, anticipating a lot of people using parking spaces, and they have parking spaces going unused. And so that's continuing to be a trend as younger people and what have you get accustomed to Metro more and to car sharing and all of the things that you're seeing Metro residents take advantage of. So those are the kind of things we're grappling with. You know, these are on the edges of what our core design is and belief is.
And so that information will come to us at a later.
Absolutely. We're going to share with you all as we start to fine-tune the finishing touches, so to speak, on that. We'll share our studies, we'll share our opinions, and our information from our different uses,
Okay.
and our strategy for park sharing.
One last quick question, and then I'll pass it on to Russ. If you're on the interior businesses, are they going to have entries on both sides? You mentioned the interior will look like the front, but will they also be able to come in through the Broad Street side?
Yeah, a majority of the project will come through the Broad Street side or the West Street side. All of the patio restaurant dining will be on the street. So along West Broad Street and along West Street, especially facing the trail. We are also trying to create what we call in the industry a social gathering, or a place for people to congregate in a safe and comfortable environment to enjoy and try to stay in the project longer. And to accomplish that, we are looking at making some adjustments along what we call the promenade to put in some roundabouts that will have in the middle of them some pretty large gathering spaces that will probably be, they both will be underneath the large open spaces, and they'll have landscaping and grass and benches, and it'll be a place for people to gather. And there will be some storefronts inside, to just the right amount of storefronts that we think are necessary to create that activity inside as well. So we're going to have some activity inside, and we're going to have street activity on the outside. And we'll accomplish the street activity on the outside by a lot of restaurant patio seating and some front doors for certain retail shops. But as I mentioned earlier in our presentation, one of the things we're trying to do inside is to create a kind of a condensed union market, and go with a concept of mixing about 4 or 5 small retailers that are providing meats, bakery, cheese, wine, and fresh seafood. So it's almost like we're creating a gourmet grocer, but it's narrowly focused with different shops that the customer would walk into, and try to create a market street effect. So that's a long answer to your question, but that's kind of how it's going to work. We want activity inside, place gathering inside, and we want vibrant street activity on the outside, mainly through dining, patio dining.
Thank you. Russ?
Just as a first comment, appreciate you taking us on that site visit. Though we're all familiar with that location as residents here, it's good to get a sense of it, which is a unique experience we've had on projects of this sort.
You're very welcome. I just hope you could hear me.
Most of the time. I'm initially struck from the walkthrough about how the use of this building, I think, will be a vast improvement over what is there. I think the financial model and the numbers we just heard sort of bears that out, and I think that this area could stand to have huge improvement and be a much more beneficial to the city, both aesthetically and financially. However, when looking at the plans, I'm initially struck with sort of what I would call a fortress kind of look. This view that we see on the screen right now really lends itself to that impression, and I appreciate that this is not how you'll be viewing the building from the street. But it feels, at first glance and going through these plans, that that we're ready to defend Falls Church from outside intruders. And I worry about the wall space, the facade that just wraps from what is northwest and Park intersection virtually all the way around until you get to the hotel. I know it's broken up by a couple of road entrances, but just my general feeling is that this is just very closed off. I do have some specific questions about it, but as an overall sense, I'm really supportive of the project. I think Falls Church could benefit greatly, but the design strikes me at first glance as being closed off, and concerned about that. I had heard when we were outside that this was going to be park to code, but when I read the documents, it said there was a 20% parking reduction.
There is a waiver. I think we're asking for 20% waiver on the residential parking, and I don't recall where we ended up on the hotel. And the retail, I believe, is 90% to the ordinance. What's the hotel?
It's not broken down quite, 20% reduction.
Well, that's what we've been asking for right now, but we're going to park the retail a little bit more than that.
Okay. And I also saw that there was mention of LEED for the building. At what level was the anticipated plans for?
LEED silver.
Silver.
That would be for the residential buildings.
As opposed to the hotel?
The hotel.
Which is at a different level.
Well, the hotel right now is not being proffered as LEED.
And the reason for that?
The only reason for that, this particular hotel is a Hilton Home 2, and they have a lot of LEED features in there. But the cost of getting a LEED certification is prohibitive for the hotel, for the franchisee. That's been the pushback on that.
Okay. I also want to support what Ruth had said about the traffic light at the Northwest and Park Avenue. As a frequent user of that trail, I read the comments by the NVRPA where they thought there would be some confusion at that intersection just based on some stop signs. I would also support, I would also want to see a traffic plan that addresses the confusion there, and would like to see a traffic light, is my sense of the way that intersection needs to be finished. I appreciate that there is some redesign that should be helpful, but I think a stop sign traffic light rather, would be very beneficial at that location. And I'll let other people speak, but I was curious about what the change was, and I'm not sure if it was city based or from you. Our original plan we'd seen had two single family kind of looking homes in the location where the condos are, and I know that has changed in the application. I was just curious what the rationale was and who was pushing for that, you or the city.
That was probably a combination. A lot of people were concerned about just the two single-family homes. Those two single-family homes were going to be about 4,500 square feet to 5,000 square feet apiece. The problem from our perspective was that the two single-family homes were not allowing us to park underground underneath them. So we lost a lot of parking. Our parking garage got pinched significantly. And so that was one of the reasons that we moved away from that. And from comments that we've heard from Planning Commission folks and from the city staff and other folks. The other thing is that we learned a lot about the interest that the city had in reducing rental apartment units, which have more of an impact on the school system and so forth. So we really looked at bringing down apartments and replacing them with condos. And so we started to explore that direction and found that that was something that we could get. I'm sorry? Okay. Okay. We found that that was something that could come to fruition, could be financed, and so we started to explore how much of that we could do, and we went in that direction. The other thing is when we got rid of the drugstore, that was a loss of a lot of economics for us. The drugstores are the highest paying tenants in retail. They also have very, very strong credit ratings, so that brought a lot of financial capability by the retail to the financing of the project. So when we lost that, that also made it difficult to maintain 2 single-family homes and not do some more build-out on the property. This property is very, very expensive. It's more expensive than what was paid for the other projects that you all just recently approved, and substantially more. So I don't wear that as a badge of a blue ribbon or anything. It's just the nature of what we were dealing with and what we had to do in order to assemble this much property.
All right, thank you.
When we originally saw the project back in March, I wasn't a big fan of single-family homes anyway. I felt like you guys should have more parking, and I think green space is actually a better buffer than more buildings anyway. But I have to say, when I started looking at the project, I wasn't really very happy. There's a lot more residential units. The percentage of retail is much lower than it was before. What I really felt like we were being, story we were being told before is that this was going to be really going for young professionals, people who like to use the bike trail. You were talking about making sure that there were facilities in there for the bike people as well, that there still would be a place bike people would want to stop like they do now at the 7-Eleven and the Lazy Sunday. And I just don't see that anymore. I feel like that's just all been kind of scraped out of there. I mean, we only have 14 efficiencies. We have a lot of 2-bedroom apartments here, a lot of 2-bedroom condos. I mean, I guess from a planning commissioner point of view, the real missing demographic for us is those 20-year-old, early 30 young professionals. And I just don't feel like, I feel like what we have now is a building that isn't really going to bring them in like it was before. The feel has totally changed on it. And then I was looking at the Hilton Home 2 suites, and I guess these are, technically long-term business or semi-long-term business because they have kitchens. At least that's what they have on their website.
Right there, it's an extended stay hotel.
Extended stay?
Right,
Okay.
and the average stay is anywhere from 3 days to probably 7 or 8 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not totally excited about extended stay, but you're right. Their website is totally about being sustainable and green, and just shocking to me that they don't want to be LEED. Most of the newer hotels I stay in now are LEED, and it just doesn't make sense to me. And I think it would be really great for you to push them a little bit at this. If this is their brand, it's ridiculous that they're not backing their brand up, because it makes me not want to stay there. Because now I'm like, well, these guys are greenwashing. They have this great green sustainability message on their site, but here they are not doing it. But yeah, I'd love to see more efficiencies in here. I'd love to see some of that young professional feel come back in it, because I'm just not seeing it now. And it's like Russ was saying, you see this building now and it just seems older. And the condos, from the side, it looks like a step pyramid or something. And so I'm just saying, I know we're not supposed to get into the architectural side of it now, but I'm with Russ. There's a lot of issues here for me visually. I just like to see less units, a little bit less mass here, and a little bit more of a younger feel, because that's what I was hoping to get out of this, to fill that demographic gap that we have. You know, from a plan perspective, we need more of that. And I thought this building was going to be that building, and I'm not sure it is now. And I think that if you want your parking reduction, you need to make this more friendly to young professionals, because older people have cars and they like to drive.
Well, that's our target market. What's happening right now is there is a lot of young people moving into the market here in Northern Virginia. We know the folks down at Northgate. They are very surprised at the amount of young professionals that are moving in, that are sharing rooms, 3 people for a 2-bedroom, 2 people for a 1-bedroom and a den. That's actually the market that we need to have, and that's what we're going for. And we're going to design a building inside, which you can't see today, that's got modern features. It's all geared to what the millennials want. There's a lot of outdoor space for pools, recreation, grilling. This whole building design is all about that. And that's an extremely important part of what we need to achieve to make it successful. So
Yeah, and I know that the visuals aren't on because you guys don't have the architecture finished, and the
Right.
colors aren't always right, and the materials may not be the materials it looks like.
correct.
But, and I would just say as we move forward on this, we definitely have to see some materials and have a better feel for
Sure.
what it looks like. Because really, from the outside, it almost looks like a retirement community building to me. So, I
Well,
mean,
those things can be fixed.
Okay.
Let me add one more thing on the
Yeah.
residential mix. Residential mix here is almost identical to Northgate. The residential mix is almost identical to Northgate. And my understanding from Northgate is that they are attracting a lot of young professionals.
No, do you mind if I go? I just had a couple of things. As Mr. Brugge mentioned, and I've just heard people say, it's big, it's dense, it's got a lot of residential components. Can we just cut to the chase? What are the chances of a project, of you guys going forward with a project with any kind of significantly less residential component? Because I'd rather just sort that out now than spend the next 2 years going back and forth on that.
Yeah, we've met with staff and talked about this, and just so everybody knows, when you talk about density, if you, from the development world, you look at density per square foot or density per acre, and this project is right about 80 residential units per acre in density. The other past 2 projects that have been recently approved are over 100 per acre. So one of the things that I think penalizes us is that people forget that we've assembled 4 acres, and so we are a good acre or more in size than the other projects. We are, as I've explained to staff, we are right at the margin of what we need in returns in order to get the project financed. When we lost the drugstore, which I think is not a bad idea for the kind of retail experience we're trying to create. So I'm not negative about that, but that was a big hit for us financially. So we are also, with the hotel, subsidizing the hotel. The hotel is not paying for its land, it's paying for its parking and for the structure that it's sitting on. And after that, all of the land cost for the hotel, which is taking, what would you say, about 90,000 square feet, and it's taking, we would like to allocate a fourth of the land cost to the hotel. We're allocating 0. This is putting a big dent on us. So where does that cost have to be picked up? It has to be picked up with the residential and the retail. The retail is maxed out on the site with the room that we have. So what's left is the residential to pick up the gap. So the hotel subsidy, the loss of the drugstore, and our land costs are really driving us to this amount of density. And believe me, I think most people that were acquiring land at this cost would be looking at 100 to 110 residential units per acre to make it work.
Thank you for that explanation. And I presumably there's no market for second-story commercial, like office space or anything like that.
That is extremely risky, and I don't think we can get it financed.
And then I think that the proximity to the bike path is a unique opportunity, especially because right there, it's such a waste of stuff. There's like some scrub bushes and, I don't know, lots of grass and power lines and stuff like that. And I know that there's some complexities to doing a lot over there because there's a lot of different entities in the mix, and I see you put some money in, but is there anything, anyway, this isn't a question to be answered, but just throw it out there. I think it'd be interesting if more was thought about in that area and tying it into what you guys are doing. And
We are thinking a lot about it. It's very important. It's a unique opportunity to have an amenity like that close to a project like this.
Yeah.
We envision there will be public bathrooms that people along the trail will want to utilize because there's not many opportunities on the trail for that. There will be restaurants that will cater to the trail goers. Somebody mentioned Lazy Sunday. I've talked to the Lazy Sunday people, and I'd love to have them. And if she's here, I'll tell her again. One of the issues about keeping a tenant like that on the site is when you're constructing a project like this, the downtime. So
Right.
that's the complication between us and Lazy Sunday.
Sure.
And that's something that we're looking into to see what we can do about that. There he is. I've talked to you before.
He'd like free
Yes,
land.
you know what? We'll do that, and if we don't have to build a hotel. Now the hotel developer's here, so I can see his face is a little bit red. I don't want him to think that we are negative towards him. They're great guys, and they will be a nice. I think they'll be definitely a benefit to the city with the tax revenue, and they do a great job. So it'll be a nice looking building in the project.
Yeah, I have a couple quick final ones we can go through quickly. One, related to that hotel as an extended stay. I don't know if we've looked into this, but if it is possible that it could produce school kids, we need to make sure that gets factored into our fiscal model. Otherwise, the fiscal model would be inaccurate.
These people would not be residents. This is a business hotel
Sure.
mainly, and so you've got people staying.
That's
3 to
great.
7 days. It's not going to be. They wouldn't have a residence there, an address.
Great. The sidewalk along West is great. I heard you mention a couple different widths. I would just encourage you to make sure that's as wide as it can be, because I think sitting there eating a meal would be very pleasant, actually much more pleasant than sitting up on Broad Street. So I'd love to have that be
I agree with you. And
premium.
we want it as wide as possible. The only reason that we're going a little bit less than 20 feet potentially is because we have such an drop in the elevation of the property going from the west side to the east on West Broad Street. In order to create the access for the retail buildings on West Broad Street, we're having to push back a little bit to create some room.
Okay. And then the final comment was about, I've noticed in the voluntary concessions a shuttle to the metro, and I was just wondering, maybe it's too early to know, like the schedule of that and whether or not it would be, is it only available to residents of the project, or could neighbors who want to get to the metro jog over and hop on the shuttle?
We're going to have that still needs to be worked. We are going to have a shuttle service to the metro, and we're going to. It'll probably be set up with metro shuttle passes for people in the project. But we've thought about in the past about where it could be beneficial to the neighborhoods.
That's all. Thanks.
Just a quick question from me. When do you plan to have signed leases for this project?
Well, we have definitive documents for the hotel, and the hotel is not going to be a lease. They're actually going to purchase what's called a podium, and they will own that, and they will own their parking, and so they will be an owner. And we'll have that transaction signed and completed before we get our entitlements.
And with regard to the 135,000 square foot retail?
47,000 square feet.
Is it 47,000?
Right.
I thought it was
right.
135,000.
Well, you might be talking about the combination of the retail and the hotel, which is about 137 or 138,000.
Because I was very excited.
If you can
about
fit
that.
138,000 of retail on the project in addition to the hotel, then
so
to work with you.
So 40,000 is kind of disappointing for such a massive project.
47,000.
47,000. Still disappointing. I would wish that we could increase the retail component up above that number? Because I think
We
you're-
would like
you're-
to also.
You're in a perfect location
Yes.
to attract great retail.
I agree with you. We have just a large enough site that this can turn into a destination, and we want to pack as much retail as we can. But we've been scratching our heads trying to figure out where we can pick up extra retail space because that helps our numbers. We're looking at a few ideas here and there, and I don't know if it's going to be substantial, but to pick up some retail. But if you look at the drawing that we had before that lays out the retail shopping center, you can see. And if somebody points out where we're missing a spot that could have some retail, we certainly would look at it. Oh, wrong way. There we go. We're not going to have any retail on Park Avenue. So we've got retail lining up, and as deep as really is feasible for most retailers. We're about 85 feet deep. And I think in one spot we're 100 feet deep. So you're getting to the really maximum depth for these retailers. But you can see we're coming around the project all the way down West Street, all the way down West Broad Street. And with the depths I'm saying, there's really not an opportunity to expand retail along the street front. We've studied and studied and looked, and I think that we've maximized the retail footprint.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks. You've got a very difficult traffic situation there with the church parking. Has that been figured in with all your figures with the traffic plan?
Well, yes, and one of the
That is
neighbors,
extensive.
one of the neighbors brought up
Right,
the
tonight.
parking issue, which
Tonight.
we've heard about. Yeah.
And then also that Grove Avenue is a straight shot to the metro. So I'm glad in your parking management plan that you are going to be having a shuttle, because that will help alleviate a lot of that. And if it could include more around the whole area, it would be excellent. I certainly think we need a traffic light there. My only other thing would be, the more efficiencies. But I really, when I first looked at the plan, it's, I really don't like the architecture. It's kind of stodgy. It's very heavy. That's it.
Well, we've got some work to do on finished renderings, so it will be easier to see what the buildings look like when the renderings are really finished. And we're still at a stage where we can select materials and work with materials, and we'll take suggestions. If there's a lighter look or those kind of things, we want to hear that, and we can go play with
the Architecture
that.
Advisory Board for that.
Yeah.
But also, and the idea of the roundabouts, become familiar with the use of the space down at the other spectrum with the Mad Fox, that usable space out there, and it's rectangular. And that has worked extremely well, much better than, we ever even thought of.
We're considering something very similar to that, and that's why we opened up the project to try to create that.
When you've got traffic circles, that cuts down on space big time.
Okay, thank you. Great, thank you. Why don't we go ahead and hear from City Council, being mindful of the fact that time is dragging on, and we do have another matter tonight and a closed session. But why don't we start with Mr. Z?
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to start. And thank you, Spectrum and hotel people and all those interested for coming out tonight. Quite frankly, I didn't expect to see the 50-some people wearing suits on a warm summer evening, huddle around, listening to every intonation of where things were going to be. I'm glad you didn't run out of orange cones. We would have been in a world of hurt. The orange cones were to mark where the new entrances were going to be. So I'll keep my comments brief, just because I think there's going to be time for that. And I'll address those in terms of two buckets. The first one would be public benefit. And they include traffic safety for the neighborhood, Grove, West, and Park. in particular. If you don't help out that traffic situation, do something more than just the endpoints, you'll never get their support, and that makes our work extremely difficult as well. Secondly, the conversation with regard to contributions to open space. The park, the WOD, we've kind of glossed over that, and I think it's because it hasn't been fully thought out, but to the extent it works into your financial package, we'll have time to talk to you more about that. Third, you mentioned the shared shuttle. That indicates that you're working probably feverishly on making that happen, and that's a good thing. Lastly, in the public benefits basket would be retention of current businesses that are treasured by the community. And so I'm heartened to hear that more work will be done on that as well. And you can bet I'm going to help you on. The second one is in the basket of what I call environmental sustainability merit. And so fortunately I don't have to lead the charge at this point. There's a whole groundswell of folks that they'll talk you until you're green in the face. And so we can either do it or you can do it the hard way. So, just there's more to be said about that. Thank you.
Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the question that I'm trying to answer tonight is this prepared to be considered for first reading at our next meeting on Monday? So my comments briefly will just focus on that. I mean, the questions that have been raised, concerns on a variety of areas, to me, explain why we have citizen volunteers who grapple and do very deep dives into architecture and traffic and environmental standards and economic impact and so forth. So I'm encouraged to hear all these questions. I don't think we know the answers to all of them. Should it be a stop sign or a traffic light? That's exactly why I would like to get this out into the community and give the boards and commissions time. The schedule was outlined earlier, seemed to give ample time for the community to talk about this over the pool at the summertime, at the fall festival, come back, go to school. I mean, there's ample time for this to percolate through the community and hopefully for us to come to solution on some of these questions. Mr. Fuller, one thing I did want to ask, the current FAR of the site is roughly what? The projected new FAR is 2.91, right? So do we have...
Correct, yes.
Is there a current use FAR?
Current use. We haven't evaluated that, but we can include that in
Okay,
a
if
future
that
staff
could be
report.
a fact that we could bring to Monday's meeting, that would be good. I'm assuming it's something under 1?
Most definitely. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Something that's on track with the fiscal impact, which was $356,000 compared to something north of $1 million. But anyway, I'd like to have that at our meeting Monday if we could. Another fact that I'd like to have at the meeting Monday is because of the discussion about how the building seems to be, the residential product seems to be modeled to some degree on the Northgate. Northgate has rented up pretty thoroughly, as I understand it by now. I think it'd be helpful to know what the public service costs are projected to be for the Northgate in all the areas that we measure. Student count, of course, is the one that gets the most publicity, but there are traffic impacts and so forth that can also come to us on Monday because I believe, I live on the West End, I believe the crow flies from this building, projected building, is about 3/4 mile to the West Falls Church Metro, which I think is about maybe the same distance as Northgate is to the East Falls Church Metro. So I would think that it would be attractive to the demographic that the applicant is talking about, young professionals. Which leads me to the final question about the parking variance. There's one other thing about the commercial program, but the parking variance, if it's 20%, presumably is grounded in the fact you believe that there's going to be more metro usage at this site because of its proximity by foot to West Falls Church and by bike to East Falls Church Silver Line. Is that?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Yep.
And also the nature of the millennium
Okay. Okay, again, for Monday, I think it'd be helpful to just see a distance, walkable distance, bikeable distance, so.
We have all that.
Yeah, okay. And finally, on the commercial program, the skepticism that you hear, I think, around town is that when we build new buildings, it takes a while for the ground floor to rent out. And that's true, it does. The way those buildings have been designed, I think, lends to that. They're not parked the way that this proposal is parked. I would submit, eventually do fill up, and the fiscal impact of the mixed-use buildings that we've done is strongly positive. But there's a difference between what you're proposing and what we have had before. It's kind of half of one and half of the other. There's a good bit of surface parking as well as underground parking.
That's correct.
And so I guess it would be helpful to know another project in the area which follows that model, and maybe how it works, the kind of retail that it attracts, and maybe even its appearance, to speak to some of the concerns about the way the building looks. So if you could bring anything to us on Monday that shows us something like this and how it works and the kind of tenants that it attracts, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Mr. Baruch?
Thank you. Well, I want to just start off by saying, I think we're having a discussion about whether this is going to come up Monday or not, and whether it's ready to go. So I know that Councilmember Duncan wants this to come forward, but that's I'm still anxious to hear from my fellow council members about what their thoughts are. But preliminary, in talking to staff had indicated to me, and this goes to the threshold question of whether I think this is ready or not to go to first reading, is that there was an indication to staff that there's no flexibility on the residential density or on further guarantees of the development as regards to the commercial project. So if that's the case, and I think that's what Andy was trying to get at, that indicates one course as far as what I think about whether this is ready or not to go to first reading or not. Right now, we've got many priorities on the council, on staff, and various development opportunities. And just want to be clear, if there's not flexibility on those 2 points, from my perspective, I don't see this project as one that I can support as an individual council member. So I just need to get some clarity on that. Staff has indicated that there isn't on both fronts, and I have to say that there had been lots of discussion and lots of time spent with various commercial programs, including the concept of Union Market or Eastern Market type of concepts is one use for the commercial. And the other concept that this was discussed was a draft house cinema, which would actually increase some of the retail use because it would go underground. And yet you would preserve the upper stories. And I know that that's a concept that was discussed at some length and actually had support on from the EDC and also from the Planning Commission when it was discussed, but nowhere is that found in the most recent submission or even talked about in your papers. And I have to say, when I read a voluntary concession that says on paragraph 4, written merchandising plan shall be created by the developer consistent with the requirements of these voluntary concessions, the plan shall be provided to the city manager prior to the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy for non-hotel commercial spaces. So what that indicates to me, with all due respect, is that there isn't a commercial plan right now, and we'll figure it out by the first occupancy permit being issued. I mean, when I read that, and this just came in today, I'm actually sort of thrown back by saying, there had been lots of discussions about what is the commercial plan for this. Various models were discussed, and this is what's showing up in the voluntary concessions. And I'm open to having this go forward and having leases signed by the time that the occupancy permits are issued, et cetera, or getting a draft house in place by the time that entitlements go into effect or permits go into effect. But this, I have to say, is about 5 steps backwards. So I need to get some clarity on that. I'm a little disappointed to read language like this in what's coming before us. And I agree as far as the comments that were made about massing, density, et cetera. I'm not even ready to have those conversations, frankly, at this point, given that I don't know what the actual concept is when I read language like that.
Ms. Conley?
Following on what Mr. Duncan said, you mentioned on slide 2 that your team that put this all together has worked on other projects. What other projects nearby have they worked on, and do they look like this? Does anything look like this?
In Bethesda are some examples, Bethesda Row. But, you know, this concept's a little bit unique in that we are creating a lot of surface parking, almost
Right.
of used shopping center style, mall style. And that's a unique concept that is getting a lot of attention in the retail community and the development community. And you won't see a lot of this around. This is a new idea. And we've been able to, through a lot of time and noodling, have come up with a concept that can flow and that can work. So, but there are concepts like it, Bethesda Row, Pentagon Row, a little bit like that, to a certain extent. Okay. Pentagon Row has a little bit more parking without a retail experience than we're talking about, but Pentagon Row is somewhat of an example.
Okay. So my earlier question about the parking ramps, if I pull it into this surface parking area and there's no parking available, is there a ramp from there down into the parking lot? So they're not going to just pull through and try to park on Park Avenue?
Correct. Well, somebody might.
Somebody might,
and that's what some of the neighbors were talking about.
Right.
I've done it myself going to Spectrum Building, so it is something that we all need to make sure that we're addressing that issue. But there will be ample ramp to the retail parking below, and there's going to be what we call wayfinding signs. They're going to show people. We'll probably, the fast casual restaurants and the other retail that is going to be a faster shopping experience will have their customers parking more on the surface. We will probably dedicate parking for the full service restaurants and those places that people can stay for a long period of time, put down below with where the hotel is. And that's where we'll have some sharing happening.
Okay. And then my last question is just about that drugstore that is not in there. Is there could it come back? Is it gone forever?
It's gone.
It's gone.
We killed it.
Okay.
Why
We
is
did.
that?
We did.
Why does the Union Square not mix with?
Because of the mix?
Well, no, I mean, we got a lot of pushback about the drugstore, and we felt that people saw a drugstore at the front of this project and thought that that looks too much like a plain, what's the right term? Not very exciting.
Right.
Standard type of retail, so we're going to go through all this process and end up with a drugstore. So, we heard all that, and there's some merit to it. I think that not having a drugstore and putting retail that will finish off this sense of place that we're really talking about, which is a little bit more upscale than what you're seeing now between here and Tyson's Corner in urban mixed-use projects. So taking the drugstore is a good and bad thing. We're going to lose some economics. It's forcing us to take certain directions, but I think it's going to have a better sense of place for the community because of what we can do with that space.
Ms. Oliver?
I have a question first. I realize that the number of residential units has gone up. Has the size of the units also gone up, the average square foot?
The size of the units are right about the same. I think originally they were 888 square feet on average. They're 900, I think, or 889 on the original submission.
So
they've kind of come up and down.
Okay. So overall in the mix, the square footage of residential has gone up in proportion to the number of residential units?
Are you talking about just apartments or apartments and condos?
Both.
Well, you got to remember that we have two 4,500.
Thank you.
We had two 4,500 square foot single families. Does that do it?
Yep.
Okay. In the original plan, we had two single-family lots with 45 to 5,000 square foot residents on them. And when those were taken out and that revenue was removed, it was replaced by the condos. And we reduced the number of apartment units significantly. And we substituted them with 67 condos. So that created more residential space, but not more rental space. So really the condos replaced the single-family residence and some of the apartments behind the single-family residence.
When the project was originally presented, I had this real sense of a residential apartments that were geared towards the millennials, and that's not coming across as much anymore. And I know when I looked at the apartment mix, I had the sense I didn't see that it was as conducive to the millennials. There's been a lot of press recently about, you know, micro units and smaller apartments, and it seemed like the apartments here went in the other direction. And so that's just part of a broader picture that I'm getting, that there's a shift.
Can I respond to that? The micro unit concept and these smaller, very condensed apartment units for the millennial crowd is what you're seeing downtown. As you come out further, what's happening to the market is the millennials are going at bigger units and they're sharing them. And so we have a different environment. If we build micro units expecting these millennials to come to Falls Church and rent those, we're going to have a lot of vacant units. And that's just the dynamics of that market. So as you get further away from downtown, they're putting more tenants, more renters into one apartment than what's happening downtown.
Okay. The last comment I just want to make is that when I'm still hopeful that this project could be a real benefit to the city, and that we could get this right, and this could go well. And I was very impressed in the initial presentations with your streetscape and the work that you were doing to focus on the retail and the experience of people that were walking by and that were biking by. And I would like to see that continue. I did, however, in the sort of middle presentation variation on the retail space, I was very excited by the Cinema Draft House concept, and I am very disappointed that that is lost. And I think that
Well, it's not lost.
that it's not explicit in the materials that we have here, and that remains a concern of mine. For the broader question about whether or not this is ready to move forward, I think we can see from the participation tonight, both at the walkthrough and even the people that are standing through all of our long comments, that there's a great deal of interest in this project. I think that people have a lot of ideas, and I'm with Mr. Duncan in that I believe that the input could be very useful. I think in the city, in the past, there has been a concern that once we refer out to boards and commissions, we don't get much changes. And I still think there are some more significant changes that I would like to see before I would feel happy about this. So I'm on the fence about whether or not to refer it out for that reason. And
Well,
that's my
if I
last
can
comment.
respond for just a quick second.
Quickly.
We are very interested in getting to first reading and having an opportunity to get more of the public's comments, because we're interested in hearing those and seeing where the project can be improved. We are not, we don't see this as a completely finished project. We think that we've done a lot of work, that this project to us is what we call kind of fully put together, but there are architectural issues, as we've heard tonight. There are some fine-tuning of pedestrian issues. There's some fine-tuning of streetscape. So we're going to listen to that. We are dying to hear the public comment, so that we don't go through another round of changes trying to anticipate what people want, and then only get to the point that we get to the public, we hear some comments we hadn't heard before, and now we got to go into substantive changes again. We've spent a lot of money doing that so far, and we think that it's really important to get the public comment as soon as possible if we can. It would help us greatly.
Thank you. Is that it, Ms. Oliver? So I've got a few questions as well. Not really questions so much as comments. One, I think the site has a great deal of potential. I mean, it's underutilized economically. It's at a prominent location. You've consolidated a number of parcels that are unlikely to be consolidated in the future. But I still have a number of concerns, and I think in some regards the project has taken a couple steps backwards. I think you'd heard at our last work session that there was a feeling there was an awful lot of residential density, and we've added, although albeit in commercial condominium status, we've added still more residential units. And so our commercial residential mix has gotten even worse than it was before. I'm concerned about the massing on Park Avenue. I think it's an awful lot of density on a single-family residential street. On our walkthrough or our walking tour today, I saw where the cones were, and it looks like your building is actually closer to the street than the single-family houses are. In other words, you have less of a setback than the houses in the neighborhood you're trying to fit in with. And so I think that's an issue as well. I think the traffic connections are challenging, and it's not because of anything you're doing, but I think it's a problem you have to solve. And I think there's still more work to be done with traffic circulation, traffic connections. I agree with Russ's comment about feeling closed off. If you look around, really the entire site, if you go around it in a circle, there are no openings other than a ground floor. In other words, the building is just one solid mass for I don't know how many linear feet, but essentially around the whole outside of the building, other than the breaks to go by vehicular ingress egress, it's one solid building, which I think is a challenge to overcome. And maybe that can be with architecture, but I don't necessarily see it here. I have some concerns as well about the hotel. It sounds like you're kind of handing the baton off to a hotel developer. And I have some concerns that we may end up with a standard suburban or off-the-highway hotel design, which concerns me. I don't want to have a EFA structure or a structure you'd find right off of 95 someplace. I think this location begs for a more urban design with more urban materials or higher quality materials than you'd find in a typical hotel location. I'm not necessarily getting the sense that that's where the hotel portion is heading. I am also concerned about the 2 single-family homes being replaced with whatever the number is, 67 condo units. It just seems like a real big leap to go from the residential density of 1 house or 4 houses per acre to a density of maybe 30 units per acre, or whatever the condo density is. I share the concerns about ensuring the high quality ground floor. I know you mentioned upscale, and I think you have every intention of doing that. But from our perspective as people on City Council, the Planning Commission, we want to ensure that happens. And so you may say that now, but things may change in the future, and we don't have any control over that. For example, Northgate, you discussed Northgate earlier. I'm sure that project had every intention of very high quality retail, but right now you have a Hertz Rent-A-Car as one of the locations. You have a cosmetic dentist. I think there's some kind of kickboxing or something like that, maybe a nail salon as well. I think here on council, we don't want to approve a special exception with the idea that whatever may be, and that we have no control over what's going to go in there. And so I would recommend that you come back with what you intend to commit to do. In other words, you can commit to do this amount of this kind of retail. If it's a movie theater, which I think would be well received by many people, then make a commitment to that. Because absent that commitment, I'm not sure we can rely on the fact that you say it's going to happen or it may happen. We have no assurance to that. And the only assurance is it'll be retail of some persuasion, which is a pretty broad category here in the city. So I would suggest that you, whatever program you have for the ground floor, you put it forth in writing so we know in the voluntary concessions that we can count on what it may be that you say we're going to get. I would also encourage you to be a little more bike-oriented. I know we had that discussion earlier, but it seems like that might have been lost in this latest iteration. But given your proximity to the bike trail, it just seems like a natural. And I don't know what that is, but didn't hear much about it. I don't need to hear about it right now, but just tell you maybe in future you could highlight that, because I think this is an important opportunity to tie our city in and your residents in with another mode of transportation. I do, as far as first reading and the like, I've been hearing from staff, it looks like staff is just beginning the review of some of the materials you recently submitted, and that many of them are being updated, the TIA and other things are being updated. And for that reason, I think there is some additional work to be done before this comes to first reading. It doesn't have to be a long period of time. But I guess my input would be that I think we do need a little more time for staff to work with you to try to get these issues in better shape for us to go ahead and send this off for first reading. So that would be my input, but it's certainly welcome to hear from others additionally on that issue. But we do need to wrap this up shortly. We have a few more issues to go through. Mr. Baruch?
Thank you. And I do appreciate the thoughts about the staff just recently received the voluntary conditions, et cetera. But I'd just like to go back to sort of the threshold question. I mean, a lot of the comments that we're getting and that I also have is, what's the flexibility on the residential program, and two, on what Mr. Tartar alluded to and I alluded to on trying to get a better vision on the commercial components, and also getting that more solidified in the VCs, signed leases, et cetera, before we go final. And I understand that a lot of work needs to be done, so I'm not suggesting that we need to have signed leases by first reading. But there's ways of working with you all in making sure that there are leases in place before, say, permits are issued, et cetera, various permits, and making sure that there's various steps along the process that essentially protect the city's interest, which is our responsibility as council and also planning commissions and other boards and commissions. But as I mentioned before, and I felt that I needed to be a little sharp in my comments because of what I saw in the voluntary concessions pieces. I really felt that that was a step backwards, especially in light of the various discussions that the EDC had that had gotten communicated to you all on just the economic component, let alone the design components. And again, I don't want to pay short shrift to a lot of the design components because I do have the concerns about a lot of the design issues that have been discussed, especially Russ's comments about sort of no break, and also how Grove is sort of not really focused in on. I think those types of issues can be resolved between first and second reading, but unless I get a sense of whether there's flexibility on trying to solidify the retail program within reason, and also that the density on the residential can be addressed within reason, I don't want to spend a lot of my time and the community's time when we have to address other issues.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, very important to this issue of timing is this project is just about the end of its life, to be blunt. There's been over $500,000 spent, well in excess of almost 2 years of working with the city. It's extremely expensive to try to respond to redesign each time we have a work session, and we're not at first reading. We've yet to be able to go into the community and hear what they have to say at full length. The staff is not going to be able to evaluate a full TIA and all these other documents in any event until all of these other issues are resolved. It's going to be a bit of work in progress, so to have to do more work to get to first reading, it's really contrary to the way the process should be working. First reading should begin when an application is applied for. It's been to the EDC at least 3 times, actually more than that. And then it should be given first reading out to the public so the public can comment on it. And then we can begin. We're already negotiating with you almost in this work session. And the bank that wants to extend more money on this project is looking to a first reading. And if it doesn't get first reading, I honestly don't know what they do. They may not issue any more funding.
Let me clarify my point, if I may, for 1 second. I'm all in favor of this going to first reading as soon as possible, but I still haven't gotten an answer to, can we get to the point where between first reading and final approvals we can work on getting to yeses where the city's interest on the commercial program is advanced, the developer's interest there is advanced, and we can tackle some of the residential density issues that we've all been hearing.
Yes, it's apparent, it's obvious that we don't do that.
So if we can work through that, then I say let's go forward, but if I can finish, I haven't heard that in discussions from staff. So if there is a potential of moving forward and addressing those issues, I say let's put it on and get this thing moving.
Yes.
But that's not what I've heard so far. So if I can just get an answer to those 2 issues.
I think that there needs to be discussion with you between first reading and second reading about the commercial part of it and coming to some understanding of what it's going to be and how it's going to get there. So
that's a failure on my part. I should have said that, yes.
On both.
There's willingness to have those discussions because the project all works together.
Yeah, and I guess I'm going to press a little bit. There's discussion and willing to actually address some of those issues.
Let me state this. We can address the residential density issue if we can somehow with you address the other financial issues. See how to pay for the project. And we'll talk to you all day long. But this project ain't going to work for any of us if we can't finance it.
May I?
Duncan.
I will not extend, but could you just speak to that point a little more specifically? The number of residential units. Every time we reduce the residential count, we also, as I understand it from the documents, reduce the amount of money, particularly that comes to us for the school cost. Is that correct?
That's correct. The original submission would have given you 302 units at $75.11 per unit for the school. This gives you 253 at $75.11, and the condos are proffered at the spectrum price or close to it, which I think is about 50% of the proffer for the residential units, because the condo units have a less fiscal impact on the school system.
We know from our experience that that's the case. Okay. Again, more information I think would be helpful to bring to our meeting on Monday. I mean, I don't feel like, I appreciate my two colleagues pushing hard on this because it's very important. And we all agree on that, I think, that negotiations must be undertaken. But I think it's just so very important because of the range of impacts. I mean, I would like for this project to solve problems that we have not been able to solve in this end of the city for the 30 years that I've lived here. You know, Grove Avenue has been a problem for 30 years. What I saw out there tonight offered some beginnings of solutions to problems that we have not either had the resources or will or incentive to address. Park Avenue, they've got parking issues. I would like this project to in some way address that, if possible, even if that means discussions with the church, which has a large surface lot down the street that I'm not quite sure why is not used more fully for their parking issues. At any rate, you see where I'm going. The conversation that needs to develop is not only on the track of the financials and the nature of the commercial program. That's very important. We all know that. The conversation that needs to occur is broader than that and brings in architecture, transportation, bike trail, so many things that we need to get the community involved and invested in so that whatever we come up with in the end, we may reject the project. We may vote for it on first reading and then reject it in the end. That's possible. The community will understand why we did what we did.
Well, there is a reason they call something like this a conceptual plan, and it's not fully baked in.
Mr. Z.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. If I wasn't explicitly clear at the very beginning, I think there's a lot to like about this project. I think it can be improved. I think we need our citizens to become engaged in this, and as long as we keep it within our own little small circle, there's no way we can get all their input. And I can see that the amount of time we've taken on this has not contributed to much clarification of the chaos and answering of important questions. So therefore, I would support going to first reading on July 28th. That we do that. It sets into motion a sequence of events that could culminate with a rejection of this proposal on November the 24th. I think we need to get out to the public. Thank you.
Other comments? Ms. Oliver, Ms. Conley? Do you have anything to say? So, I'm not sure where we are right now. I think there's certainly two of us, Mr. Brook and myself, who believe that the staff needs a little more time to work on this. It sounds like there are two who feel that this is ripe to be heard for potential first reading next week. Do my two colleagues on the right have any comments or idea of tipping the scales here?
I would probably err on the side of going to first reading.
I would also support going to first reading.
Okay.
And I think just on that, again, I think staff review is very important, and if they can get what they need done, even at a high level, I think I would be satisfied. What I will not be satisfied with is if we don't get some clarity on those 2 points that I raised specifically on what type of movement, not to say that we have to solve it Monday, but getting a better sense of what movement we can get on a little bit more surety of what the plan is going to look like and what our key factors are going to be. And I'm very interested in getting public input on what the second sort of leg on the commercial piece is going to be. I'm not wedded to a draft house if that's not what the community wants. I'm not wedded to, the concept of an Eastern Market or Union Square type of notion, but it's got to be a key anchor to meet the SE requirements. But what I want to hear from the developer and the applicant is, what are the steps that can get us there? VCs is just the beginning of that. Can we also advance to various approvals just to keep the incentives in place and make sure that the guarantees for the commercial piece are there? And then secondly, what can we do to address some of the density issues on the residential? So that's what I'll be looking for Monday. Not that we're going to have it solved, but language that moves well beyond what this is. And we don't have to iron out the language between first and second reading, but at least key indications of where we're at on Monday.
Okay, I think we've got our guidance, you've got your guidance. Thank you very much for coming out. Thank you for leading a walking tour, and thank you to the public for turning out.
Very much.
We'll take a 5-minute break and then commence with the rest of our business. Thank you very much. Take your seats, please. Let's go ahead on with the next item, being cognizant of the time we have, and let's do this as quick as we can and start the ball rolling. I don't think we're going to make any decisions tonight, but merely get updated on where things are and plan out our future steps.
That's correct, Mayor Tarter. We do have, I think, exciting updates on the City Hall project, and we want those to be out there. We want people to be talking about them. We want the council to have time to think about them. But the project has made some significant changes since the last time you've seen it, and Cindy will present those to us. I just want to thank all the staff, the public safety staff in particular, who are here and have been, participating in this planning process for a long period of time. And we have our architecture team here as well from Dewberry. Cindy can make these introductions, and then we'll go through a pretty brisk presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Shields and Council. Tonight is to do an update, and then as we mentioned in the cover memo.
There you go.
Okay. Now, can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. Certainly don't want you to miss this exciting update. We do plan to give you the update tonight and then come back to the August 4th work session for follow-up dialogue and discussion after you've had time to absorb this. The community has, and we'll have all of council there on the 4th. As Mr. Shields mentioned, we do have several key people here. I do want to point out James Mack, who's sitting at the laptop for me. He's our Public Works Chief Engineer that's serving on this project as our lead. And then we do have J. Paul and Marlena in the front from Dewberry. And then quite a collection, including our Library Board of Chair and Library Director, Sheriffs with Marilyn and Tom, Chief Gavin, and Leica from the Courts of Clerk will be back shortly, but her sweet young children, who are being amazingly good in the background, needed a little break. And Doug Frazier, our building official. So that's related to the folks that are here for the project. So with that, a lot of the stuff in this PowerPoint you've seen before, so I'm not going to go through it in detail, but the idea was to put it in a consolidated document for you. Do want to give you, a visual view of City Hall and our campus and sort of the evolution of our civic engagement and our gathering place. So here you have the 1940 City Hall to 1953 with the first water tower. Now what you have is 1957, and what's important to realize that the core of the project that's before you now, that's been approved financially, but we're looking at the concept, is maintaining that core structure that then got the east wing in 1986. And what we're proposing somewhere between now and the roadmap we provided on July 7th, starting a construction in 2017, is an expansion in the front and the rear and some improved parking, so you keep the core of the existing building intact as our civic engagement home. The project goals and benefits remain the same as we've been talking about since the first Dewberry report in 2008. Significantly public security, public safety around parking, police courts, how we move prisoners, people coming to and from court that are either witnesses or on either side of the party. Central entrance for accessibility and citizens having safety entering the building, wayfinding, water intrusion, energy efficiency. The one thing I did want to note is a new factoid that we identified. We researched how many meetings are held in City Hall, from council to school board to planning commission, all the boards and commissions, VPIS, And on an annual basis, that's 388 meetings that are regularly scheduled. Then there are quite a few ad hocs in between that have occurred. So I wanted to give you a sense of that. Current progress, as you saw on the July 7th work session, we have expended $1 million on the critical renovations, and they're summarized there for you. And we have completed the internal stakeholder verifications of staffing and program function needs. We're at 20% plans right now. We've been spending a lot of time in the last month and a half updating cost estimates. Having had civil engineers, mechanical HVACs, all the trades on here doing a very detailed assessment and analysis. And we are now following up on your February 10th briefing, the July 14th meeting with the judge, police, and sheriff, and then leading towards August 4th. This is an approved CIP project based on approval of funding in FY 12, 13, and 14. $1 million has been on critical renovations spent, and so that has us with 10.7 that we're looking at for the public safety expansion, renovations, and the parking to be further described. There have been some key changes since the 2011 concept that came out of the task force work and Planning Commission and Council approvals. And some of that has been based on that additional civil engineering and MEP work where we found some significant stormwater and site constraints out front that increased some budget components significantly. And also, we have experienced 3 years of inflation since this funding was first cost estimated and approved, and we are anticipating, since we're not going to go to construction based on the roadmap that we gave you on the 7th till 2017, we're building in additional costs, inflation factors and contingencies into this budget. That has a result on refining your program. 3 key areas of scope changes then would be the parking. We have moved the parking from the front to the rear, so it would be behind council right now as you're seating in Dogwood as a one-level secured enclosed public safety parking structure that would be for police, judges, sheriff. So it meets all the same security needs, but it's a one-level, basically providing the parking that we need on grade. That addressed the site and stormwater issues that surfaced when we did the detailed work out front. The rear addition that would also be behind council is smaller, mostly a corridor now instead of extra space, and I'll show you some pictures of that. And then we are moving court services into the building due to needs of working with the clerk of the court and HHS and phasing the HVAC in over time instead of all at once. So visually, from an aerial view, you would then have the parking structure in the rear, and that is sort of sitting where the cooling towers are now, the brick structure behind Dogwood. And so you would have also the generator, trash, and cooling towers here. And you'll see in a moment the expansions here and there, similar to what have been in the designs before. This slide is just to say that when we do the community engagement in the spring of next year, that the outside of City Hall and all the architectural designs will need more input, similar to what you were just discussing on the previous development. So we have different options out there, but right now the center one is what you're seeing, but it's not that it's done, it's just a placeholder put in by staff in Dewberry. So what I'd like to do now, to give you a flavor of this instead of just words, and in your PowerPoint you'll see the actual concept drawings and stills, is we'll do a flyby so we can kind of get you a sense of how this would look and feel as you move through City Hall. So right now we are looking at the aerial view, new central front entrance, parking in the rear, and Garrison Kit did this from planning, and we even had our shadows. So here you would be facing the front of City Hall, and we'll come back to an inside in a minute. Moving around to east, this is the current police entrance. Coming around to that secured, enclosed, one-level parking structure. In the back, you have you would walk around. Oh, he's showing you the inside. That would be parking, animal warden, bike storage stuff. 2 levels of corridor in the back and a new secured elevator. Coming around the west wing, back to the front, And now you can see we would enter at grade into the City Hall with an elevator and stairs. And you'd go down half a flight to get to the meeting rooms and up to court. So now we're going up, and this is the ante-waiting room before you go into what is currently the court chambers here. And then Garrison is going to take us inside. So here's that waiting area, a quarter behind the elevator where you could have a service counter for voter registration. Next to it, development services. So all the permits would be on first ground floor. And then there's a bridge between east and west wing for what is now the third floor. We're referring it to the second floor because you don't really have three. But that's your wayfinding and ease access for staff on either wings. And there you can see those counters, staff space. This would be the current sheriff's store to give you a landing. You go down that half a floor, and there's our new meeting room, Dogwood, fully accessible. This is where you're sitting right now. That would become dispatch and emergency operations, sheriff. This is more meeting room. So we get a lot of upfront meeting room accessible, back to secured areas for public safety. And this is the quarters in the rear, sort of from the inside there, you can see. This would be staff connecting and utilities, and this would be secured to get behind the courtroom and the items that we talked about, the public safety. And nice shadows. Nice shadow. And then we're circling back just to ground you where we started with the flags. You got Little Falls and Park and the open space that still would function, farmers market, but you have a nice central accessible entrance that kind of makes a statement and is nice and visible. So with that in your PowerPoint, you do have those stills so you can kind of feel the layout of the new meeting space as you come up a half a level. These are the concept plans that council saw in February, but now revised to match the parking in the rear. And so you would still come in from the front. I do want to highlight that this is a new elevator here in that central front, and there's a new security one in the back. The two existing east wings that are very problematic, failing, and even recently we got another staff stuck in them. We would actually abandon. It was cheaper to build two new fresh and put them in the right place than to try to renovate those and make the wayfinding work. So that's actually a very positive plus. This is the security, and so I just want to highlight the new secured parking's here, and the police would come in this way. Your central meeting areas are here, and then this is a secure corridor for the police stuff. So your back of the house secure stuff remains the same with good wayfinding for staff, police, and movement of those public safety pieces. Council chambers remains as seen, and we've talked about before that you would have a closed session meeting room, judges' chambers, and a small break kitchenette here. This is that secured corridor that you saw on the flyby. This would be the upper one with the elevator, so we'd have good traffic, prisoner, judge, sheriff, and security. And this shows the public safety features with that elevator that still gets you down to the holding cells for the police. The next one gets you down to their current floor, which is roll call, armory, and evidence. And then you would have on the upper level where third floor east wing is, where the city clerk and city manager and so forth are, that would connect in that upper corridor that we show in the flyby to the third floor west wing. So we wouldn't have lost citizens or staff in the building. The north side parking is, as I mentioned, a one-level secured on-grade enclosed parking. There could be an option if council wanted to pursue that to put a second level on it and make it a structured parking that would add about 40 spaces to this campus that could benefit library, community center, heavy special events days. That estimate right now to do that would be $600,000. We are looking at the option to put solar panel as a canopy cover over either of the parking options. That's not in the current adopted budget, and so we need to look for grants or other funding sources to achieve the solar panel, but there's a lot of cool opportunities and options out there now That's just some concepts in the plan to show you what that parking could look like. This very busy slide gives you the chance to look at the section view as to how all those levels, parking, and everything interface. So I'll leave that to you to sort through. The two other things that we wanted to cover this evening was a touchback on the tear down build new scheme. There were some additional questions from the February council meeting, and then we also had asked to look at off-site rentals, so that's what the next few slides will cover. This is the basic design that you saw before. We didn't spend money reblocking this. This is the parking that would sit over the front part of City Hall. So as a reminder, you would have to build this, tear down City Hall, then put in the parking. But what we did do is look more at how it would flow. Council wanted to know how it would be parked and how could you space it, including the option to take the 50,000 square foot City Hall and add 30,000 library space if we wanted to do a consolidated option. So this is sort of a central part of this new building that would be your stairs and your elevators. This is the library on 2 front floors that would be on Park Street, so you'd have street entrance. City Hall administration, that's just a block for all the other functions in City Hall. And then you'd try to coordinate your public transaction pieces and a general lobby to come in for court. So your secured parking would be below grade here to police, and then your public parking would be here into this common area and then moving throughout the places. So all parking would be in the back unless there was the few street parking and then walking for public entrance. So that also is in your PowerPoint deck. This is the same massing as you saw before. We didn't do new architectural designs on that, but you would have Park and Little Falls here, and you would be building out to the front, just stepping back for the required 20-foot sidewalk from curb. And this is 3 stories for the 50,000 square foot. So if you were to combine it with the library, you would add another floor. So this is just an alternative. Right now, the current City Hall sits back and you have the green space before it and you look up to it. This would bring it to a more urban look right on top of the streets. The costs we have updated. And so what you have here is to do the tear down, rebuild, new City Hall, $34 million. That's made up of 3 stories of the construction, then demolition of the existing City Hall and hazmat abatement, and then site work and all the furnishings and equipments and new IT infrastructure. If you added a 4th story to add 30,000 square feet to this building to reach 80,000, and the library's consultant's report, you'll recall, was 33,000. So for ease of floor plate, we did 30,000. This square footage here, this 13.6, is the construction square foot, and we look back at the library's consultant study and added in the amount of funding that would be needed for furnishings and fixtures. So that's 13.6 to add to the library for $48 million to do a tear down rebuild option, either of just City Hall, public safety, or with the library. Office space, I mentioned we were asked to look at, well, what if we just rented off-site some office space in some of these new developments and be a tenant in those commercial space. So we looked at using 5,500 square feet as the benchmark because that's about the amount of square footage we're adding with the front and back expansion. We'll gain more than that in the renovations by reconfiguring and picking up stairwells because we will still, in this plan, fully sprinkler this existing building. Using $40 a square foot all in, which was based on June 2014 numbers. The cost is $217,000 per year to rent that space. It is Class A because the concepts have been in the new development as anchor tenants. We did do a 20-year analysis since the bonds for this project is a 20-year term, and so that would be $4.3 million over that same time period. If you did that versus the projects that City Hall is currently designed, you would not be meeting the public safety security goals that we've described and that you've heard at your July 14th closed session. You would have public response and staff effectiveness decrease because your efficiency and effectiveness are going to go down as you have a function off-site, whatever that is, that still needs to interface back here. and it doesn't address the existing code, maintenance, upkeep issues at City Hall, and eventually your costs here are going to go up. So kind of doing a one-slide comparison of all those, you'll see that the approved CIP expansion renovation project, which includes the parking level secured, is 10.7. That remains a staff recommended project to proceed with our current design from this 20% to 60. And we have completed the majority of that critical renovations, or actually 3 are currently under construction as we speak. Now, there are some alternative add-ons that would add $4 million if you wanted to do all the HVAC up front, if you wanted to do the full square footage that was originally considered, if you want to add a parking layer in the back, and expand some more renovations, so kind of gut every floor and take every wall out to increase your flexibility. That would be 4.2 hard construction costs, and then you need to add some design and contingency, so you could round it to 5. And then you can see the tear down rebuild office space. These are the slides from before, just so you'd have a quick reference. So what are our next steps? Staff recommends that we come back to you on August 4th, so you can take this information, read the materials, ask some questions in between if you have them. We'll get your input then on these 20% designs. We also would like to suggest that maybe council revisit the task force that you did in 2011, which was specifically for City Hall Public Safety, and it had 10 key stakeholders involved to continue the input and design on this. Then we would recommend that we proceed to the 60% design, have a community charrette at that point with what the architecture, look and feel, and the functionality, especially in that central front, works, come back to council at that point, and then proceed to full engineering, construction, and bid docs. This is the timeline that was laid out in your July 4th or July 7th roadmap. And if we proceed as just described, then we would be reaching construction beginning in 2017, and because it would be phased while we occupied the building, it would be a 2-year estimate. And there you are.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you, your fine, quick presentation. We appreciate all the folks who stayed this evening, the back row particularly, but I guess some in the front as well. So thank you all for sticking around, and we may ask some questions. I don't think we're going to solve this tonight, so just keep that in mind. It is getting late as well, so maybe if we can keep our comments and questions as brief as possible, that would be great. Did you have a comment or?
I just had a quick question, Cindy. Thank you very much for the presentation. I want to better understand the rental space. The slides indicated that it wouldn't meet the public safety, and this was the notion that only office would go there, or court services could go there as well in the rental space?
No, not working. The idea would be probably just offices.
So this building would still be functional for court services and police?
It would still be functional, but we would not be addressing any of the security. So the concept is you would do that in lieu of what's approved in the CIP. So if you just do rental space, then you'd have to not be addressing the security, the safety issues, the new elevators, ADA and OSHA.
I guess
things.
just, and
Or
again,
there's
I'm not
something in
necessarily
between.
interested in this, but just so publicly it's clear what we're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges.
That would be an option, just to do rental and then stay as is in City Hall.
So what that does is that gives us more space, which is one objective we have, but it doesn't address any of the public safety things, which really is the core.
But I guess that
job
begs
of
the question of what if we were to rent out the whole kit and caboodle? What that would look like. And maybe that's not doable, but just because you look at that slide and you go, well, why not do X? And then you have to explain.
We
two
could
other
certainly
things.
run those numbers as well. This was just a narrow bore in terms of the space that we gain through this proposal. What would it cost if we
Right.
leased that?
But I think analytically to look at it, what is the back of the envelope cost of renting out the whole?
Well, we did do
whole
early
need.
on with Dewberry, I looked at that option, and one, there's nothing in the city that's 50,000 square feet that you can rent an office space for.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna have pretty high costs when you have to build a jail, holding cells, the court, the police station, the armory, which all has to have certain ballistics and stuff. So it's not just office. So we have run it there's just the reality of not a current office building to rent.
There could be the possibility for that, so that's why I'm just interested in that. I mean,
Well, I think probably more realistic option is to do the rent out of office space, but then the possibility of doing just the renovations related to security. And I heard a number for that previously, although I don't recall that. It was like $1 or $2 million to do the security upgrades. That's my understanding. That you could do, for example, the elevators and the things like that without necessarily doing the whole 9 yards, but to make certain security upgrades involving adding a second elevator and things like that.
You can't do it for $1 million because you've got the corridors, you've got the elevators, but part of the security is also the central front entrance. And so you have a lot of components that would separating staff from public. So we'd have to work it out if you just did the public safety, but it is not 1 million. I don't even know. I don't want to ballpark.
I don't know why I
it.
thought at the hearing it was 1 to 2 million for doing certain elevators and segregating prisoners from the, from the general public, et cetera. It wasn't probably the whole 9 yards, but I do recall some discussion of limited upgrades as discussed at some point. I don't recall
Yeah,
when.
that might be related just to the corridors in the back and the one elevator, but it would not address all of the items that were discussed in the July 14th closed session.
Okay, why don't we turn this over and have some, fairly brief comments or any questions going around the whole table. Maybe we start with your side of the table, Ruth. Anything? Okay.
Oh, wait, I do. These are awfully small, but I'm worried that if you're going ahead with the renovation, has the planning department disappeared?
No, the
Where did they go?
Yeah, so on the third floor where it says development services, and this will be on the website, so I can get back there. There we go. So part of what you would have is on the third floor of the West Wing is development services, public works, engineering, and then some other city functions, and we haven't totally decided who goes where. And then you would have on the central front entrance your actual development services counter, so it would come down from the third floor and be accessible just as citizens walked in the door.
So the staff would have approximately the same
Yes.
space that they had before?
And then you would also have staff on the first floor, West Wing also.
Okay. Thank you, I just...
So we definitely are keeping our planning director and crew in mind.
Maybe there was something that we should...
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Regarding the parking, the secure parking that you talked about, will the public have the opportunity to use the parking over the weekend? And
No, that would be 100% secure at all times because we run shifts of police 24/7.
but if the council decides to build the next level, that level could then be used for public parking as well.
Yeah, and probably what we would do is pull all the city vehicles and city staff up there, so you don't have a lot of traffic around the police function, and that by default opens up 40 spaces for citizens. This first level secure will maybe increase us by 10 to 15 spots just because we won't have the cooling tower and we'll have much more efficient parking, but it's not increasing by much.
And then finally, I'm all in favor of the first scheme. I think the new building is really doesn't fit into the image of the city. So that's my comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lindy?
Yeah. Did we solve the problem of the police bathrooms versus any bathrooms being used by prisoners?
Yeah, so in that secured area where I was pointing out, I may not remember which way to go now, James. Let's see.
That's all right, as long as
There
you
it is.
have.
Yeah.
I trust you on that. But
The center area would be the showers and bathroom and kitchenette for the police and sheriff and emergency operations.
But there would be a separate one for any prisoners, or?
Yes.
Okay.
This is all secured for public safety, separating
Okay,
them from
great.
prisoners.
But I definitely think the addition of the upper deck parking would it extend any further into the park?
It would be the same footprint, it would just go up a level.
And I'm glad you solved the problem of all the excess, changing things around in the front. I think that
Melissa?
Yeah, you had a look on your face when she was talking about the bathrooms. It was basically like the police were having to use public bathrooms, and they would have to worry about where their guns were, because
Yeah, that's, well, yes.
Not very safe.
Not good.
no. You know, and I don't know if all of you remember, I know some of you were in council when we did the tours of the police space, especially the lower floor police space, and how bad it is down there.
I think the chief had an animal down there when I was down there. Yeah, it was maybe not on purpose, but
Well,
I remember that vividly.
If you haven't had a chance to go into basically a sub basement where most of the police action is, you should go down there, because it's actually, when I did the tour, especially where IT was and where a lot of the police functions were, I was actually ashamed as a city at some of the space we had people working in. It's ridiculous. If I had to work there, I would have left that job a long time ago. It's just not, a lot of the police space isn't connected. It's very difficult to use. And I just say this because we have been talking about this project for so many years. And it comes up, we get it planned, it starts to go, and then no fault of anyone, we get a new council in, and the questions start over, and we back it up again. And in the meantime, we still have a lot of the same problems. We still have space I'm ashamed that we have people working in. We still have safety issues. We continue to have people wandering through these buildings because they can't find anything. Because as you know, probably as you've tried to find things, you can't get from one place to the other. And
no security.
And there's no security. And I've seen people, I've come to meetings and where I'm in the Magnolia Room, which is like around the corner down here, and I've had people trying to find it, and they say they were in the other part of the building. I don't even know how they could get in the other part of the building. It's supposed to be secure at night. So I'm just saying that these are real problems, and I think as citizens, even daytime, just trying to find the registrar's office. It's just, this building is not functional as it is, and I guess Ruth and I were just like, we're going, okay, now it's 2017, and we're just shocked that this keeps going on. Right, well, I know, but you know, this is the thing. I don't think we're going to pay for a new building, not when we have this facility issues we have with the schools and the library. I don't think that we're going to spend that much money on it, but what we got it down to, working with Cindy and working with the Planning Commission and other council, I mean, we brought that number down and down and down and down to the bare bones, and this is pretty much the bare bones. The original proposal was much larger, and we just peeled everything off. So I hate to see this project continue to be pushed out and pushed out and pushed out.
Thank you very much. Karen, Ms. Oliver, do you have any comments?
I will just echo what Melissa said, that I hope we can make a decision on August 4th about a path forward and have a clear path forward.
Thank you.
And I hope there will be a second deck to the parking.
Thank you. Ms. Connolly?
I'll just echo what Ms. Oliver said, and we can move on to the next thing.
That sounds great. Mr. Baruch?
I have about 20 questions.
Good.
No,
Where is the holding cell?
And where is that? And where is that voluntary concession?
And I'm glad to have a meeting with you and negotiate that.
No, I think this has come a long way. I think because of some issues with stormwater, the parking deck, which I had the biggest issues with, all of a sudden fit in the back. So I'm glad to see that change. And I'd be interested in sort of doing, I think if we can do some public parking, it may make that a little bit more viable. If for some reason there isn't support for that, I'd be interested to see and hear what the cost could be cut if it wasn't covered in the cost-benefit analysis of that. But what I like about it being an actual structured lot is the potential for having a second deck. But short of that, if that's not where we're headed, I want to see if we can cut the cost down.
Well, to be clear, the current structured enclosed doesn't have a structured roof that you could put a layer on. It just has the security roof. So that $600,000 would convert the roof to a secured parking floor and go up.
Thank you. Mr. Duncan?
Thanks for all this information. Let me just ask a specific question. On the full North Addition on the add-on option differs from the 5,500 square foot, $11 million option in what way? What do we do on the north side?
If we had done the full rear extension, it would have been about 4,000 more square feet. But if you go off-site and you don't, you have to pick up corridors and common areas, and we have some office space in the central front entrance, so you have to have more space. So it's 5,500 versus 4,000.
Okay. I guess public parking, Mr. Baruch brought up. I would like a better understanding, if I could, of, not tonight, but the data on what we're actually getting in the way of public parking. I mean, to me, is as big a problem as the building is, and it is a problem. We have to fix it. It's just the number of parking spaces and the kind of inaccessibility of a lot of the parking spaces, lack of ease getting in and out. Things are kind of tightly packed. I mean, I'd like whatever we do to have numbers that show me, you know, how many public parking places I'm getting. The option you mentioned about the staff parking on the roof, is that going to be enough for the staff? How many staff are still going to be parking at level, at grade, on the ground? If you should just give us that information. I'm trying to come up with a way to assess these based on how many square feet I am buying for the money that I spend. And what I'm seeing is that I'm spending $11 million to get 5,500 square feet, or $34 million to get 30,000 square feet, or $50 million to get 80,000 square feet. And obviously the way those divide out is significantly different. And my objective, in addition to solving the problems of the building and the parking, is to do something that will prevent future councils from having to go through the long process that we have gone through here. And I'm totally serious about that. In my world, value engineering is just a dirty word when interest rates are as low as they are. And so I would like to see us do as much as we possibly can afford to do, so that future councils don't have the opportunity cost, you know, taken from them of talking about this, when we should be talking about improving the quality of life and promoting economic development.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Mr. Z?
Yes, thank you. I would be interested in learning more about what the add-on project elements are. I assume there's additional information that can be forthcoming on that. If they could provide that to all of us, that would be good. What is the square footage of the now captioned north side parking concept plan view? The square footage?
J. Paul, do you remember the square footage in the parking structure?
Yeah, you can give that to us along with the what's in the add-on package.
We can bring that on the 4th if you like, Mayor, with the other questions.
Sure, that'd be great.
And then lastly, should I presume that the public safety officers, police force, and sheriff department have been intimately involved in this particular rendition?
They have indeed. And I have concurrence that this plan meets their expectations and needs, and there's nods back there.
Do they like it?
Great.
They said yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me just wrap up. I've got a few questions, comments myself, but I'll be as quick as I can. One, I think this is a big improvement. What we've been shown previously, I actually like this. I think the reason this didn't move forward is because people had hesitancies. Maybe they couldn't even identify. I know I had some, but I think this is much better at first blush. I'm going to give you some comments that are way premature and probably totally minutia, given the grand scheme of things. I'm going to throw them out there anyway. I don't like the elevator. As soon as you walk into this grand glass opening, to have an elevator staring you in the face just seems like we can have a better opening than that, or a better entrance than that. I like the glass. I think the glass contrasts nicely with the colonial nature of the rest of the building. And kind of, if you've done right, I think it'd be a great kind of interplay with what we have there now. I think we should do the second level of the garage. It just seems very silly. Those are $15,000 per parking space or something thereabouts, and it seems silly not to do that. I also would like some kind of either vegetative wall on the garage or something to basically keeping more in the nature of our park and our green space we have immediately adjacent, and not sticking out like the new structure might. I'm also concerned about how we're going to pay for this thing. And so if Mr. LaCondra could tell us what he believes the annual debt service would be, and then also how that would impact the tax rate, I'd certainly appreciate that. That's all I've got. Oh, we got to wait till August 4th?
He's got to plant that money tree.
Yeah.
I would say that this is...
Excuse me. Come on up to the...
And as Mr. LaCondre comes up, I will note that this is approved CIP from 12, 13, and 14, so that debt service has been estimated into your adopted budget already, and we've already issued $4 million of this money.
We've already issued $4 million in debt for this?
Yes.
So what's that money doing right now?
1.2 has already been spent.
Got
and
it.
When we issued it, we were on a faster path, so the rest is currently waiting.
Sitting.
So we got $2.8 million sitting in the bank,
Yes.
earning what, 1/10%, something like that?
Yes.
And paying out what, 3.5, 3.25,
No,
3.75?
it's about 2.8.
And how long has it been sitting around for?
Since January.
January.
January this year?
Yeah.
Okay, and how long is it going to be sitting around the next 20 years unless we do something with it the next 18 years? I guess 20 years probably.
Well, if the council wasn't going to do anything with it, we would refund it.
Yes.
But but that is how we're paying for the A&E, and that's how, we would move the process forward.
Gotcha. And what does that cost a year in terms of debt service? What is that? I guess it's debt service and principal repayment, right?
Yes, it is.
What is that per year?
Offhand, I can't tell you right now.
But don't you sort of ballpark, wouldn't you, for
For the $4 million, it's generally about 400,000, but it's less than that. It's like
Less than that.
250.
Yeah, because of the 2.8.
250 for borrowing 10? What's this going to cost?
No,
Not the 10, that's just
not
the
the
4
10,
that's
it's the 4
outstanding.
that we've already borrowed.
Gotcha. But what I'm seeking is the total amount. Like, in other words, the total improvements that we just heard about. What approximately?
For the 11.7, I'm going to say it's going to be about 800,000.
800,000 per year for the next 20 years. Okay, that's all I've got.
The next one up, Mount Daniel was 16 million. You said that was about $1.1 million or something, right? So it's going to be
A third off.
right. Okay.
Okay. Well, listen, that's all I've got. Unless there are any other questions, we do have a closed session to go to. And I would thank you all for coming out this evening and appreciate your time and effort. So thanks so much. We'll see you soon.
Where are we going?
We're going to go up to the Oak Room for a closed session. We'll come back. We'll go in closed session and then go upstairs and then come back down and come for closed session. Come out of closed session. Thank you all for coming.
So, Mayor Tarter, there has been the request to add a very, very quick discussion of acquisition of real estate at the end of the closed session for recruitment of the city attorney.
I'm okay with it. It's very, very quick, and I hope maybe everyone else is as well, but that's got to be real quick because it's pretty late already. And some of us have been going since 6 o'clock with the Gang of 8 meeting. So, all right, that's fine. But let's make it quick. So, what's that? We're not going to go into closed session right now. I want to get everyone out of here first. So if you all could, if you're not here for the closed session, if you wouldn't mind vacating the room. We're going to go into closed session, and we're going to go upstairs. We're going to go into closed session down here. So let's go ahead and have a motion. Upon a motion made by Councilmember
Duncan?
and seconded by Councilmember
Connolly.
and passed by a voice vote of City Council. Council went in a closed session pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1, discussion of prospective candidates for employment of specific public office appointees or employees of the public body, city attorney recruitment, and Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A3 of the Code of Virginia for the discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose, where discussion in open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining power and negotiating strategy of the public body. Councilmember Baruch?
Yes.
Councilmember Connolly?
Yes.
Councilmember Duncan?
Yes.
Councilmember Oliver?
Yes.
Councilmember Snyder is absent. Councilmember Z?
Yes.
Councilmember Tartar, yes. Okay, we're going to go up to the Oak Room, take care of business, and come on back down and come out of closed session.